our online discussion of euthanasia, assisted suicide, and other ending of life questions for February 27th, 2015. My name is Amy Hasbrook, and this is Christian Gray.
Hi.
Hi, and I'm the director of Toujours Vivant, and Christian is the associate director of Toujours Vivant, Not Dead Yet. TVNDY is a project of the Council of Canadians with Disabilities to unify, inform, and give voice to the disability rights opposition to assisted suicide, euthanasia, and other ending-of-life practices that have a discriminatory impact on people with disabilities. There are many reasons that we oppose legalization, but some of the most important are, first of all, that it's unnecessary, because everyone already has the right to commit suicide or to refuse medical care and to have palliative sedation until they die naturally. It's discriminatory because while people without disabilities receive suicide prevention services, if they express a desire to die, people with disabilities are encouraged and even helped to kill themselves. Thirdly, the choice to be free. People with disabilities don't have the choice in where and how to live. And finally, in the places where it's already legal, the safeguards have not been able to prevent people from being wrongly killed. This forum with disabilities to talk about these issues, because usually the debate is seen as between conservatives on the one hand and progressives on the other, and people with disabilities are left out. So we're here to talk about our experience of being disabled, health system, how that is different, and how these issues affect us. So today's topics are an interview with Gabrielle Bouchard, who is a Montreal resident, and also the Day of Mourning work. And the first is the interview with Gabrielle Bouchard. He is the former director of the Montreal Metropolitan Association of Organizations for Disabled People and is currently starving himself to death at a local hospital. But he does not call this a suicide, he calls it letting himself die. Mr. Bouchard is 57 years old and has doing social justice work for the mobility impairment and also chronic pain. He says that he's had fragile health throughout his life. He had a heart attack in his 40s and developed spinal stenosis at the age of 40, and which causes chronic insomnia. You know about that.
I experience it.
Yep. And basically, we learned about this earlier this week, and we learned about this earlier this week, and wanted to go talk to him to see how the process was for his making this request, because he would not fit under any of the assisted suicide laws. So we wanted to see what people asked him was to see looks in it. So he said that 5 years ago, his condition began to deteriorate with muscle weakness and fatigue. But he hasn't actually gotten a clear diagnosis of what's going on. When he decided to let himself die, he was living in a second floor apartment with a manual wheelchair to get around when he's outdoors or away from the home. But in the end, he could no longer climb up the steps to his apartment. He had to stop working in October of last year because he lacked energy and concentration. And the Commission of Health and Social Services did offer its housework, but he did not feel that he could accept that help because the workers were underpaid and exploited. So because he didn't feel that was fair, that was part of the reason.
And because he was working as a social worker, and he feels it's not fair that you don't pay people.
Right, exactly. When we talked to him, he talked about his reasons, and he said, "I found myself before God with two questions. Gabriel, do you prefer to leave this world with a memory of a man who gave 35 years of his life to social services, of a man who is proud of what he's done, even very proud? Then would you prefer to leave this world in 15 years with the memory of a man who's finished his life degraded? I have no one in my life. I have no support. I find myself in extreme poverty and in decline. To leave with the memory of my duty done is even better, is much, I'll go out what I've done. And he feels his decision is well considered and that helping others is what helped him maintain his self-esteem. He also said that if he had a livable, meaning a little higher than the poverty line, and if he had the ability to control his personal care services, would not want to die.
Yeah. Now his decision is kind of final.
Yeah.
It's too late.
Yeah. As I said, he was never, since he hasn't got a diagnosis, he hasn't got a terminal prognosis of a limited amount of time to live. So not having a diagnosis also means that he doesn't know what is in store for him physically, what's going to happen. And it means that his condition is not dealt with very effectively by the social service system here in Quebec, because he falls between the services that are offered because they're based on your diagnosis.
Yeah, and the diagnosis is not there.
Right.
So fall in the crack between two chairs.
Right, and that happens also for people whose disability doesn't fit, who there's no group that supports that particular disability, there aren't enough people, or if you have multiple disabilities that interact to create certain effects that you can't get services for that. There are a lot of people who don't get the services they need because they fall in the cracks. Let's see, he talked about, since he became disabled 3 years ago, no one has told him he'd be better off dead, although we told him that if he lasted any longer, it would probably happen relatively soon. Also, that no one has encouraged him to refuse medical treatment. He considered suicide twice during the 1990s, but he said he changed his mind with the help of a good psychiatrist, and also because he was still young and had good health and still had energy. He fasted for 2 weeks at home before he went into the hospital, but then went to the emergency room because he wanted to die in a more secure environment. He was afraid that a psychiatrist would diagnose him as being depressed, and he was in the emergency room for a day and a half and saw 2 psychiatrists and 3 doctors who all decided that he was competent. He said that during this process of being evaluated, he had a physical exam, but no one offered to help him improve his living situation, such as by helping him find an accessible apartment. Neither the doctors nor the psychiatrists offered any suicide prevention services, though his pain has been and is still well controlled. He did not receive good grief counseling or rehabilitation services, so to sort of help him get back to work. Nobody offered that. He didn't receive depression screening or treatment. He was not screened by Adult Protective Services to see if there were any signs of abuse. He told the doctors that a woman who had killed her children had been allowed to let herself die in a hospital, so that he should have that. So he should have that same right as well. The doctor explained to him the dying process, that once his blood sugar level had descended below 1.5, he would fall into a coma, and that then the staff would simply let him die. In his opinion, he said, if a non-disabled person would not have been allowed to let him or herself die in the same situation.
Yeah.
And pretty much what we already believed.
That's what we call the discrimination.
Right, exactly. That's what we've always talked about, is discrimination.
And Mr. Bouchard is still living a perfect example that the laws in the Supreme Court are not needed at all.
Right. Because, you know, he is the person that they're thinking of, and he is exercising his option that already exists. So assisted suicide is not necessary. But also he's an example of how divorces people into this, because he cannot work or hasn't received you know, rehabilitation services to help what he can, and because there are all kinds of work disincentives in the benefit programs, he can't work yet, and he feels, and this is a very common belief, that if you can't work, you don't have any value. And yeah, and the circumstances also push him to not want to live because his apartment is not accessible. He doesn't even think about finding an accessible apartment because it's too difficult.
So no money, no appropriate living situation, no support, and you have the choice between the prison and that's your choice with admission. And for some people, the choice is kind of easy, and for others it's not. But in both decision, you are not happy.
Right, exactly. He talks about the worsening disability is losing autonomy. And this is social, because you physically have, your disability gets worse, but losing autonomy is a product of the social policy. So he can't get adequate services to enable him to live in his home. He can't find an accessible apartment. Those are all social problems. To die, the other choice would be to go into a nursing home. And as Christian says, that is essentially going to prison.
Yeah.
So this was a very, it was a very difficult thing to do. Gabriel was very open and willing to talk to us. He was very happy to contribute. And it's very sad to lose such a great advocate.
Yeah,
it
very sad.
Really is. And it's awful. It's awful to lose such a great advocate, and, you know, to know that there's nothing that we can do at this point. And, you know, we did try to offer help that we could, but you know,
it's too late.
It's too late.
The
basically.
decision is already taken.
Right, and he's always processed for about.
Yes, and he's very thin. He's very weak.
Right.
And he's getting weaker every day.
Right, exactly. So we appreciate his helping us and offering this interview, and hopefully we will be able to get his message out clearly. And so that was our day yesterday. So the second item on today's agenda is the day of mourning, and that is that on March, Self-Advocacy Network is organizing in commemoration of autistics and other people with disabilities who've been murdered by their parents and other caregivers. And this is the 4th year that this has been going. And it's to recognize not only people who were killed by their parents, but they've been autistic and other by police because they didn't have proper training, or they just decided that the person was misbehaving or something. So, and this gets back to the work I did that brought me into this movement of showing that in prosecution and sentencing of parents who kill their disabled children, parents are treated more leniently if the child they killed had a disability. So
it's obvious. It was part of your first job as studying law in the States.
Yeah. No, it was actually a project for
project.
completing my law degree.
Okay.
Yeah, and I was the first person who did a relatively thorough study of this issue and counted all the information and counted up the cases, and basically we showed that, you know, more than half of the parents who killed disabled children got no jail time at all, and then another you know, third of the parents got under 5 years of jail time. And that just isn't comparable with parents who kill non-disabled children. So the ASAN press release on the day of mourning states, in the past 5 years, or 4 years actually, over 70 people with disabilities have been murdered by their parents. These acts are horrific enough on their own, but they exist in the context of a larger pattern. A parent kills their disabled child. The media portrays these murders as justifiable and inevitable because the burden of having a disabled person in the family. If the parent stands trial, they're given sympathy and comparatively lighter sentences if they're convicted at all. The victim is disregarded, blamed for their own murder at the hands of the parents who should have been the people to protect them. And ultimately the victim is forgotten. And then the cycle repeats. For the last 4 years, ASAN, ADAPT, Not Dead Yet, the National Council on Independent Living, the Disability Rights Education and Defense Fund, and other disability rights organizations have come together at local vigils across the country to mourn those losses, bring awareness of these tragedies, and demand justice and equal protection under the law for people with disabilities. So that's ASAN's statement. There will be live and virtual events to observe the day, including a Twitter campaign with the hashtag DDOM 2015. So that's Disability Day of Mourning 2015. And also there's going to be a virtual vigil on Google Hangouts on Air. So you can visit the website for information, and that's at http://sites.google.com/site/Day of Mourning 2015 virtual vigil/home. So that is, if there's a local event where you are, it's a great thing to go to meet other advocates. If you want to participate online, there will be a reading of the list of names of people who've been killed and discussion about the issue. So that's one thing to participate in.
And we need all testimony we could get. So
right.
Please do testimony. It helped many people.
Right, exactly. That was one great thing that Gabriel was able to contribute to us. And so if he can do it from his hospital bed, you guys can do it. So in order to get in touch with us, there are a lot of ways. First, you can follow me on Twitter at TVNDY, on Facebook at facebook.com/toujours vivant, not dead yet. You can go to our website at tvndy.ca or send an email to info@tv-ndy.ca. You can watch old videos or on my YouTube channel. So go to YouTube and search for Disability and Euthanasia, and you'll find videos since September of 2013. And also on our Facebook page, I created a list of all the topics we've covered since 2013. So you can go and check out that document and find the date and what we've covered. And if you want to go back and look at an old video, you can do that. So thank you very much for joining us, and we wish you a great week. Thanks, Christian.
Take care.
Thanks.
And see you next week.
Thanks. Goodbye.
Goodbye.